I don't think that we can ever fully master something, because the moment we might think we've mastered something, life can throw you a curveball.
Simon Alexander Ong is an award-winning life coach, motivational speaker, and best-selling author.
Through his practical strategies, many people have overcome challenges like lack of direction, low motivation, and unfulfilled goals, ultimately finding purpose and energy in their lives.
I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
What do you think people are doing fundamentally wrong in their lives in terms of managing the energy?
First thing is we overcomplicate things. Second is
So you share a lot of thought-provoking ideas that I love about, and I know one of your big topics is energy management, which of course is a central theme of your book as well, Energize, which we will dive into. What did you notice about the world that made you highlight the importance of energy that obviously guides everything we do?
sure, I think it was a personal experience that occurred in my second job. So when I graduated from university, I started in the financial services sector at what was probably the worst possible time, the middle of 2007, a year before the global financial crisis swept across the world. Now, while I escaped the demise of Lehman, so I actually handed in my notice a few weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed, and
Hmm.
I ended up in another company. The company that I ended up in had a very toxic work environment. So there
Oh,
was no career progression, you would regularly be shouted at, and there was just no focus on the well-being of its employees. And so one Christmas, when I was due to be going to a client event, I remember picking up the phone before I entered the nightclub, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, I said to her, I will be taking the last train home, so I should be back just after midnight. But as I went down into the nightclub, I checked in my bag. The alcohol started flowing, the entertainment started kicking off. Before I knew it, I lost all sense of time, and I was steadily heading towards a very drunken state. I somehow got my way into a taxi and ended up home around 3:30 in the morning. My girlfriend, as you could imagine, was worried sick. There was voice messages left on my phone. There was text messages there, and I was in no shape to respond to them until I got home. And I tried to avoid speaking to her about what happened. So I found refuge in the bathtub in our bathroom and began to fall asleep there. She was next to me crying when I woke up, because she was worried, and she saw the state I was in. And even though I said to her, "I'm fine," the reality was far from anything being fine. And when I sobered up later that day, we had a conversation about what I was going through, and I realized in that conversation that I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Spiritually, because I was in a career that was unfulfilling. I had imagined this would be my ticket to success. When I grew up in an Asian household, it was a belief that success would be defined by my job title and to work in a respected industry that paid well. But it was something I didn't find fulfillment in. Emotionally, because I was in a very toxic environment. Uh, Mentally exhausted because I was just lost in life. I was directionless. I was now in an industry in which people hated the people in it. You know, bankers were despised by the public, and so it wasn't a particularly nice time to be working in that area. And physically, because I had sacrificed my sleep, my diet, and I was surviving on junk food. So it was at that moment that I realized how bad things were when I had zero energy. And it was that moment that made me want to refocus my attention on my energy levels. And that began with the one area that I'd sacrificed the most, which was my physical energy.
yeah, very powerful story. Thank you for sharing that, Simon. And from what I'm seeing, I mean, basically, when we talk about energy in life, we focus on the basics sometimes like sleep, diet, exercise. But I think it's a very core underlying reason behind lack of energy, which is to do
Mm,
with purpose,
yeah.
right? So I'm sure you talk all about that stuff. And How do people, when they are in a similar mode like you were stuck in life, which is pretty low and depressing,
Mm.
how do you actually find purpose from that state?
For me, and this is why I address physical energy first, is I address physical energy first because I realized I would be in no shape to discover what my purpose would be if I was surviving on little sleep. I was harming my body by not feeding it the right things, and I was not moving my body. Now, if I didn't have that foundation in place, I knew I could not even think about discovering what my purpose was. And so I deliberately moved into another job, still within finance, but that had kinder hours. So it was more 9 to 5, and I could have the time outside of work and on weekends to really focus on getting better sleep, changing my diet into something that was healthier for my body, and getting regular exercise. Now, once I started to put that into place, I was able to approach each day with far greater energy. And that gave me the desire to then want to explore what my purpose was, which at the beginning was very challenging because all I had ever known was finance.
Finance, exactly.
I,
Yeah.
I was working long hours in the day around colleagues who were in finance. I would go spend time outside of work with people in finance. So I was very much in a bubble. And so when I started to think about purpose, the first place it began was not really on the purpose side, but on the curiosity side.
Mm,
So I didn't go in thinking, well, I don't know what my purpose is, so I'm not going to start, because it is very rare for us to know straight away what our purpose is if we've never really done much work to explore it. So for
yeah.
me, it really began with curiosity. And I started to write down all the things that I was curious about. If there were no thoughts or fears about pursuing them. And one of those areas was working for myself. I was curious about the idea of working for myself. So that curiosity led me to reading different books. I started diving into the world of personal development. I read biographies about successful businessmen and women, and I was looking into how to start your own business. That curiosity into reading these inputs led me to go to seminars and workshops and hear keynote speakers present. And again, that opened my mind to just the amount of possibilities that I could begin exploring. And it all began with curiosity. Even now, today, uh, despite the fact I'm doing something I really enjoy, I'm still allowing curiosity to guide me into new areas and to explore new opportunities.
I think that's so key because so many people stay stuck in the trap of waiting to find their purpose and they just stay stagnant and stagnant. It's just like, oh, it's a mess. It's a trap. See, I'm glad you mentioned that word of curiosity and following that. And look where it's got you today. You're all over the world speaking, inspiring, impacting people. How amazing is that? I love it.
Mm, mm.
And the other thing I think I want to address with you is mental chatter, right? Because that also is very incredibly draining. It takes a complete toll on your body because yes, you can be physically fit, exercising and so on, but if your mind's always active in the wrong direction, and you talk about how you can choose or replace thoughts, right? Let's hear more about that because I love that idea.
Yeah, so one of the experiences in life we don't really appreciate is that we live in the feeling of our thinking moment to moment to moment. So what I mean by this is we live in thought generated realities. Now we can easily fall into the trap of thinking we all live in the same reality. The fact is we don't. We live in customized realities that mean that our experience of the world is unique to us. So when an event occurs, the way that you interpret it means that for some of us, it will be good, for others, it will be bad. For some of us, it will be happy, for others, it will be sad. On its own, however, an event does not have an emotion. An event is just an event. But for the human mind to relate to every event in our life, we have to derive meaning from it. Now, the meaning that we derive from it is up to us. At any given moment, we can choose one thought over another. And that transforms our experience of everything that we go through. There's a popular Chinese parable that I share in my book about the old farmer who responded to events by saying maybe, maybe not, when it came to an event being good or bad luck.
Is that a good thing, bad thing? Who knows?
Indeed, indeed,
Yeah.
that's that famous
Yeah.
parable. And I think what it illustrates is that many of us are like those neighbors in the story. We are quick to judge, we are quick to react, and we easily become a victim of circumstance. But imagine if we were like the old farmer in that story, where we could pause, we could reflect, and we can choose thoughts that are more aligned and healthier to the person that we want to become.
So you just detach from the outcomes and notice and observe your life as a witness. Is that where this is going?
Yeah, it's to be the curious observer of life rather than being caught up in thinking that your thoughts are real. I mean, this is the power of meditation. In meditation, we
Mm,
become the observer of our thoughts. We notice them passing through our mind like clouds in the sky, and we get to choose which of those meaning we begin to attach to our experience of life. Now, for me, once we understand that power, we literally become the sculptor and the sculpture. We have this superpower of bending reality into something that can serve us rather than something that works against us.
absolutely. So well said. And at what point did you learn to master your mind?
Mm. I would say it is still a work in progress. I
Sure
don't
is.
think I don't think that we can ever fully
Hmm.
master something, because the moment we might think we've mastered something, life can throw you a curveball. And you have to then draw on new
Hmm.
experiences in order to handle whatever the world throws your way. So even though I've learned so much from how to manage my mind better, I'm under no illusion that I've mastered it. I still believe that there is a lot to be said about being an eternal student, and that we are constantly a work in progress until the day we die.
Absolutely. I like to call myself a work in progress, right? That's the whole purpose of life, to be a work in progress and like continuously evolve from one level to the other. But when you say detached from outcomes, like when you're completely neutral from that space, how do we then decide what's good? I mean, again, quote unquote, good or bad for us, or what's serving us, not serving us, where we are, where we want to be versus where we need to be? Like, how do you decide that when you're completely neutral?
Sure. So here's a trick. There's a bit of a paradox here.
It is.
So it's not that you're completely neutral. It's that on the one hand, you need to have clarity of vision
Mm-hmm.
as to what is important for you. The fact is, a lot of us don't know, and so we fall into the trap of making our destination other people's destinations. And
Sure.
that's why we are spiritually exhausted, because we are chasing someone else's definition. We are living up to someone else's hopes and dreams. But when we begin to understand what does success and fulfillment mean to me and get absolutely clear on what that looks like, that gives us context for what actions we must take today. Now, that's one side of the coin. The other side, which is the paradox here, is that once you have clarity of vision, is to put that to one side and focus on the present. Because when we focus too much on the outcome of a future, we're not actually living in the present. We're giving up our emotional well being to something that may or may not happen. So, just to illustrate with an example, when I quit the world of work, i.e., working for someone else, my initial vision was to build a successful coaching practice, working one on one with people to help transform their lives. And if I were to build a successful coaching practice, I would feel happy and fulfilled. So that was my vision. And that allowed me to make decisions in the present that would increase the probability of that being a reality. At the same time, I wasn't rigidly attached to that vision being the only outcome. So, this is what I mean by being detached from the outcome. Now, when you're detached from the outcome, what it means is that you're also open to opportunities in the present. And just 18 to 20 months after I became a coach full time, I had the opportunity to explore the speaking side of my business. I was invited to speak at an event, and suddenly all these other invitations began opening up. But being a speaker was never in my initial vision. And so suddenly I could add speaking to what I was doing, and then writing a book, and then doing media work, and then traveling, and then consulting. Yet none of those things were in my initial vision. And so I think that when you have the idea that is almost like a lighthouse guiding you forward, so you can see the light of where you want to be, but not attached to that being the only outcome, but a outcome, what happens is that number one, you can make better decisions in the present, and number two, you are open to opportunity and luck coming your way.
So, in retrospect, do you find where you are today more fulfilling than where you would have been by just having a coaching practice?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Because I think what it shows me is that we evolve. When you take steps out of your comfort zone and do things you've never done before, you are going to evolve in ways that perhaps right now you cannot imagine. So you are going to evolve in terms of your ability to handle crisis, your ability to respond to failures and setbacks, your ability to inspire. All of these skills begin to move forward in very unpredictable ways because there's only so much that we can predict. None of us can fully predict the future. If you were planning to open up a hospitality business at the beginning of 2020, I don't think anybody had in their business plan that COVID would be round the corner and would mean that you could not open your business for at least a couple of years.
I'm sensing like something interesting here. So, would you say that detaching or being open to opportunities helps you to get rid of the fixed mindset on what we should do and should not do in life? Like, would you say that being detached maybe makes the distinction between career virtues versus legacy virtues? You talk about that, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Because and this is a bit of a link to goals in that if we only focus on goals, then the question it raises is what happens once you've achieved your goal? What
Yeah.
next?
What's the next step? You see, hedonic
What's next?
treadmill, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so what happens is that when you look at people who run marathons as an example, their goal is to complete the marathon. And once they're clear on that goal, they will set up a training routine, they will have healthier lifestyle habits, and then they'll complete the marathon. But what tends to happen on average is that if that was their only goal, after the marathon, they go back to the habits they had before they were running that marathon. Now, the goal only helps you win that one time. But if you are now open to other outcomes, if you focus more on stacking the odds in your favor that you win again and again and again, what happens is you have a system that allows you to enjoy multiple outcomes of success rather than just one. And I guess the word that is coming to my mind as I speak to you is that of adaptability. Our ability to adapt is driven by number one, our curiosity. Number two, our openness to learn from every input. And number three is detachment from a particular outcome. Great if it happens. If it doesn't, I'm willing to learn on what else I can explore. So you're able to adapt to a very fast changing world.
I think that's also linked to having a certain level of self belief because if with the whole mass mindset, then it's very hard to actually focus. I mean, just trust the process and surrender in some way because, yeah, you're just like stuck in what people want you to do with your life. And like you said, living someone else's version of your life. So, how can people cultivate self belief or confidence?
You touch on an important topic because there's one statement I love sharing with audiences, which is there are always two sales that occur. The second is selling you to others, and the first is selling you to you. And to cultivate the belief that we have in ourselves is simply to have the courage to take new steps forward. Because each new step that you take forward is building your self confidence. It's building that inner spirit that says, actually, this isn't so bad. This wasn't as bad as I expected. What else could be possible? But that confidence and that belief cannot be built if you're not taking any action. And so when I switched into entrepreneurship and as I began building my businesses, what I wanted to do from a mental perspective was to, as quickly as possible, collapse that gap between idea and execution. Because what I noticed looking around people I spend time with is they would have lots of ideas. I mean, it's very easy to come up with ideas. Pick up a book, you come up with an idea. Have a deep conversation with a friend, you come up with an idea. But how many of us put those ideas into action? That gap tends to be wide. That gap can be as wide as a decade or longer. But imagine we were to condense that gap between idea and execution. So we are always in experimentation mode. When you're always in experimentation mode, what happens is that you build that belief and confidence that actually you can create something. You can learn fast because of the speed of movement between idea and execution.
So is that where energy comes in the picture?
Because when we talk about mental and emotional energy, this is where it kicks in here. Because when you take even just one step forward each day, a year from now, that is 365 steps forward. As you keep taking consistent steps forward, what it generates is this energetic feeling of momentum. You will have felt it at some point. Those listening will have felt it at some point. Now, that feeling of momentum is that inner voice saying to you, "Hey, I think we're going places. Hey, I think what we're going somewhere here. This is working out. People are liking what we're doing here. We're getting more of an audience." Now, you only get that reward of that inner voice saying that to you when you've actually done something, when you're consistently putting something of value out into the world. So that feeling of momentum should not be underestimated.
So confidence comes from action because your mind needs evidence that you've done something. That's how it works. And it only comes by getting on and doing stuff rather than waiting for stuff to happen and confidence to strike you, which obviously will never happen.
Definitely, courage always comes before confidence. You can stand in the mirror and shout affirmations about how you are an incredible speaker, and how you don't have any nerves and how you're going to wow the audience. But if you have zero evidence to back it up and you've never been on the stage before, as much as the affirmations serve a purpose, that lack of experience will show. But if you are consciously aware of that, and you build a transition step from, say, maybe going onto a panel, maybe hosting a panel, maybe doing a small audience and then doing that big audience, what's happening is that you're building that belief for the fact you're showing your mind that you've done this before, or that you've got the experience in place that allows you to speak to a bigger audience.
Absolutely. So we're in this world of constant information and noise and whatnot. What do you think people are doing fundamentally wrong in their lives in terms of managing the energy not the right way, perhaps?
First thing is we overcomplicate things. We overcomplicate things. We get told the solution, and the solution often is very simple, but we don't like it, and
Yeah,
we
we're
go,
like, is
it
it that
can't be that.
simple? Really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it can't be
exactly.
that easy, it can't be that simple. And so we go off researching on the internet, going into chat forums, looking on YouTube videos, finding this mysterious and mythical strategy that will solve everything in our life, and we overcomplicate it. There's a popular proverb that goes, eat an apple a day and you will keep the doctor away.
Hmm.
How many people actually eat an apple a day?
I
I
don't.
mean, the essence of that proverb, I mean, apart from taking it literally, the essence of the proverb is that eat fresh fruit and
Yeah.
vegetables a day and you look after yourself. Very simple, very easy for any of us to do, but how many actually follow through with it? And so we go searching for diets at the beginning of every new year. We go searching for quick fixes, forgetting that actually the solution is right in front of us. So the first thing is, I think people overcomplicate things. Second is, we find it hard to say no. And so when we say yes to everything and everyone, it's no wonder that our energy very quickly dissipates. And the moment we know what it is we want and we know what it is we want to say no to, we can start creating boundaries around us and politely decline the things that are not meant for us in our journey. And I think the third thing is writing down on a bit of paper, in one column, all the things that give you energy, and on the other column, all the things that take energy away from you. And just reflect, which column are you spending most of your time in? Chances are it's going to be in a column that you are spending a lot of your time doing things that take energy away from you. If that's the case, you got to start shifting your attention to the column where there are things that give you energy. If you can do that and you can start doing that today, what happens is you're going to go into each day more excited about what is possible.
Do you have any tips for people who are stuck in jobs that they have no option out of, a way out of in the current scenario, and they just have to stuff that drains their energy? How can them how can they in that situation manage the energy better?
Sure. So there's two things you can do. On the one side, it's how do you focus on the things that you can control. So outside of work, you could start building a network. You could start exploring what other jobs you would like. Start talking to people that work at that company and get an idea if that could be your next step. Maybe outside of your work, you could upskill. You could learn new skills, try new things that will add value to your brand and what you can offer future companies. So those are the things you can control. And there is always something you can control,
Yeah, there's
however
always a
small.
way, isn't it? There's always a
Indeed.
way.
Now, on the other side, there are things that you cannot control. So, if you are in a company where the culture is toxic, or you have a boss you don't like working with, or you have colleagues that don't really energize you, or you don't look forward to spending time with, now those are things you cannot control. So, what you do is you dilute its impact. So, if the impact is negative, you think, how can I dilute the impact it has on me? So that could be on the way to work. You read a uplifting book. When
Mm,
you're at work
yeah.
and
Your
you're focused,
podcast, whatever.
yeah, you
Yeah.
listen to a podcast, you listen to some uplifting music, you manage the impact of the things that you cannot control so that the magnitude of that impact lessens. And you have more energy reserved for the things that you can control.
And I think a big shift could come from just transforming our digital habits. That's just all over the place right now, phone in the morning, phone late night, like late night screens. It really drains you, subconsciously drains you.
Yeah, and this is where it's important to look at those moments in your day that you can control. When people say to me, "I don't have time to read, I don't have time to look for a job, I don't have time to network, I don't have time to do anything else because this job is killing me," I ask them, "Well, tell me about your commute. How long does it take to go in to work and back from work?" So they might say it takes me an hour on the train, there and back. So that's 2 hours. If you spend lunch outside and you meet some friends or you have a break during the day, how many hours is that? So they might say one. Okay, we've got 3 hours already that we can take advantage of in a week. That is 15 hours. 15 hours in a week. Now imagine if some of those hours were used listening to a podcast, listening to an audiobook, reading a book, reading a magazine that teaches you something new, doing a course on your smartphone. Imagine what you could achieve in 15
Mm.
hours a week.
So well said. And that really hits home. Yeah. No excuses, guys. No excuses in this room. So, Simon, you, someone who has clearly achieved visible success in more ways than one, what would you attribute that to? Your mindset, or how you kept yourself sane through this whole journey of stumbling up and down, which I'm sure you have.
Mm, interesting question. I mean, because I've always thought about what drives me. Even when I started to get some success and I started building the profile and doing the work I get to do, I've never been one to rest on what has been achieved yesterday. And I think that part of it goes back to the point I shared with you earlier about being a work in progress. But another part of it goes to a deep, deep appreciation of the fact we only have one life. And, that's something I learned from losing my mum when I was 17 years old. And that really hit home about how fragile life can be and how short life is. And what I want to spend my life focused on is fulfilling my potential in the best way I can. And if I'm not doing so, for me, I feel like I'm wasting my life. So if I get to spend time with my loved ones, with my daughter, doing work that fulfills me, impacting lives of the people I get to work with, through my speaking, through my book, through my coaching, and think of new ways that I can adapt what I do to influence even more people, that just keeps me going. That just keeps me going because it becomes something I don't see myself ever retiring from. If I truly enjoy what I'm doing, it becomes part of my DNA. It's something that makes me feel alive. And why would I quit that?
I love that. And whenever you have stumbled upon a really hard time or difficult circumstances or whatever, again, have you applied the sense of detachment from that so you can just immerse yourself
Mm,
totally and not be so consumed by what's happening and not what's happening?
mm. We work get hard times. I still
Yeah.
get hard times now. I mean, challenges are different, but they're still challenges. And I think the way I detach myself from it is through my own coaches that I work with, but also the act of journaling. So journaling for me has been a very powerful activity to understand one's thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but also to find order. within
Yeah.
what goes on in the mind. Um, I think that if we just leave thoughts brewing up in the head, especially when you're going through a tough time, it can paralyze you because you end up thinking about your thinking about your thinking,
So true.
and it becomes so draining because a lot of the stuff we end up thinking about are scenarios that may or may not even happen. So they're future outcomes that we have no idea are going to manifest. But if I download everything in my mind onto paper, it allows my brain to see things through new perspectives because I write down what's in my mind. I then end up asking myself, well, what else could that mean? What is the lesson here? How could I overcome this challenge? And so my brain starts thinking about solutions. But also, it's quite refreshing. You know, when you download what's on your mind onto paper, your mind feels a lot freer. And that just gives me space and oxygen to focus on the other things that are important.
Absolutely. And I have to ask you this question, even though the answer is pretty obvious, but what is the one thing that really energizes you?
Right now, it's spending time with my daughter.
Oh,
Really
I don't see that
energizes me.
coming. That's so sweet. Oh my God. I'm glad I
That
asked you that. Yeah.
yeah, that really energizes me because I think when you become a parent, your priorities begin to shift and you
Mm,
really begin to understand what matters. And so even though my work energizes me and when I see the
mm.
impact it has on the lives of other people, right now, nothing beats coming back home, seeing my daughter, picking her up from school, dropping her off at school,
That's so sweet.
and witnessing her development. For me, that is what is energizing me right now.
And that's so, so cool. I mean, I love kids as well. So I completely resonate with that one. And yeah, like because you're on the Becoming an Epic Beings podcast, what does an epic being mean to you?
For me, an epic being is someone who is clear on what matters most and is not afraid to stretch themselves in order to become the best version of themselves and to achieve extraordinarily epic things.
That is a really epic answer, one I haven't heard before. Super cool. Thank you for being here, Simon. And like before I leave you, where would you like people to check you out and find you?
Sure. So my website is simonalexanderong.com. I am on all the major social media platforms, but the two I use the most are LinkedIn. You can find me at Simon Alexander Ong by searching that on the LinkedIn search bar, or Instagram. My handle is at Simon Alexander O.
Amazing. And would you like to give a shout to your book as well, where people can find and order that?
Definitely. Thank you
On
so
your
much.
side. So yeah.
Yeah. So the book is Energize. You can order it at getenergizebook.com. It's also available on Amazon in most
Perfect.
countries. So you should be able to get it there.
Amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.